All right, we're going to go ahead and get started. Morning, everybody. How's everybody doing? Good, good, good to hear. We're going to finish up our series this morning on our view of on really how we view God and Him being the God of second, multiple chances, and showing how He continues to give us chances in our lives to get things right with Him. We spent pretty much the month of December looking at some parables and lives of people in the Bible that God has given second chances to. Last week we looked at the life of Jonah and how God gave him a second chance to obey God's call on his life, and how God used him really in both phases, in his disobedience and obedience. In his disobedience, some sailors are able to come to God that may not have known him otherwise. And in his obedience, finally, after being swallowed by a whale, that he finally obeys God. And in that, people of Nineveh are saved. So disobedience, sailors are saved. Obedience, people of Nineveh are saved. And so with that, it just does show us that God's sovereignty really is at play in the lives of His people, and even people who are not His own. And so, even with Jonah's hard heart, God still works, and that gives us encouragement in our lives to know that God can work in our lives, and that He is slow to anger and abounding in mercy, as Jonah stated reluctantly about that, because that was the reason he didn't want to go in the beginning, was because he knew God would forgive and God was merciful. So in today's class, we're going to look at Moses, one of many people that God has given second chances to in the Bible, and just going to see what we can learn from Moses about God. So let's just start. And before we actually start with a word of prayer, I know that Rob had mentioned last week with Jonah what tribe he was from. He was from the tribe of Zebulun. Also, just so you know, that son of Adatiah, who was from the tribe of Zebulun. All right, so let's start with a word of prayer. Heavenly Father, thank you for this time that we have together to look at your word. This is the day that you have made. We'll rejoice and be glad in it. Thank you so much that you've given us this time just to be able to spend looking at what you have to say to us. I pray that as we look at the life of Moses and just at the life of your people, that your Spirit just gives us wisdom and discernment and just speaks to us in our own lives and what we should be doing to draw close to you, and to make sure that we're used as a vessel by you and not an obstacle that is in your way and stands in your way of what you want to do. So I pray that you continue to be with us, be with all the things that I've studied. I pray that you be with our church here, that you be with those who are listening, that they are able to hear and take something to apply to their lives today and throughout this week. I pray for those who are on their way here. I pray that you keep them safe, bring them safely here to be able to hear what you have for them. I pray for the rest of this service as well, those who will be listening to the word and experiencing the worship, that we worship with all of our heart and spirit, and that we hear the word that you have for us, and that would be able to say that it was good for us to be here. So I just pray this in the name of your Son, Jesus Christ. Amen. Most of us are pretty familiar with the story of Moses, so I won't go into the details of everything, like his origin story and that I typically do. So we'll just kind of jump really into his life in Egypt, really growing up as the daughter of Pharaoh. Really just kind of start from there as we go into how he experiences his second chance, one of many. So we'll start in Exodus chapter 2, verse 11. Now it came to pass in those days, when Moses was grown, that he went out to his brethren and looked at their burdens. He saw an Egyptian beating a Hebrew, one of his brethren. Now, just maybe a little bit of background here. So although we know Moses lived in the palace as Pharaoh's daughter, uh, but was really nursed in his younger years by his mother. Pharaoh's daughter just thinks that this is some maybe random Hebrew woman, not realizing that this is Moses' biological mother that's doing it. So in essence, she's hired to help raise him, which is pretty ironic for that, which just shows you God at work even in that. Go ahead, Vern.
Was his mother's name Jochebed?
His name, that was her name.
And his father's name was Amram.
Mm-hmm. That is it. That's good. And yeah, both followers and had faith in God that he would deliver them, knew that this child was a special child, and put him away by faith, and God's going to take care of him at that point. And so it just so happens that Pharaoh's daughter sees him, and then his sister sees him and says, "Hey, can I get somebody that may help with nursing him?" And they're like, "Sure." And so not only does she, by faith, get to see her child, and her child is spared, but she's actually paid as hired help to raise him, something she would have done anyway. So that you couldn't get it better than that, to raise him and paid. So that just shows you how God works even in that. So she really has a small window of time with Moses, where she teaches him who he is, about the one true God of the Hebrews. And so that she knows she has that small window of time, because when he gets of age, her services will no longer be needed at that point. And so she drills in him and says, "You know what? I know you're being raised like an Egyptian, but you're not one of them. You're a Hebrew, and we worship the one true God." And so with that, she's probably like, "I'm not sure why God arranged it so that you would be in this palace and in this place, but God must have something for you, something that we can't give you at this time." And so Moses has these things in growing up. So although Moses is in the palace, he's trained in the best of everything: math, sciences, languages, speaking, writing. But he doesn't forget who he really is, even in all of that. And we know that Moses wrote the first 5, books of the Bible. So God just uses him and uses that training to bring him along to where he would need to be. And so by the time we get to this verse 11, where it says he comes to pass and he sees his brethren looking at their burdens and seeing an Egyptian beating a Hebrew, he knows who they are, and he knows that he's one of them when he sees this. And so really what we see here is really the first attempt as we read on. "And so he looked this way and that way, and when he saw no one, he killed the Egyptian and hid him in the sand." So we see really Moses' first attempt really here. When we get, so actually I'll read these 2 verses. "And when he went out the second day, behold, 2 Hebrew men were fighting. And he said to the one who did the wrong, 'Why are you striking your companion?' Then he said, 'Who made you a prince and a judge over us? Do you intend to kill me as you killed the Egyptian?' So Moses feared and said, 'Surely this thing is known.'" So go ahead, Nick.
It takes me aback when it just glosses over. He looked both ways and then he killed him.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, to kill a man is no small thing.
No.
You have to
Didn't just beat him up. Yeah.
Really angry and outraged.
Yeah. And I would imagine this was probably something that has been building really in Moses, knowing who he is, and day after day seeing the injustices, knowing that these are his brethren. And I would imagine this just wasn't a one-time thing. This was, "I'm going to do something about this." And maybe it didn't intend to come to blows. Maybe it intended to maybe knock him out or whatever, but this guy dies. And so really we see this as Moses' probably first attempt at leadership and helping his people. And obviously it goes horribly wrong. for this first time out. And as I look at this, and as you said that, looking to the right or left, I wonder, how does this get around to the other Hebrews? Who made you prince? Do you intend to kill me as you killed the Egyptian? It says he looked both ways. There are three parties involved here. There's Moses, there's the Egyptian, and there's the person that he saved. Moses isn't going to tell on himself, and the Egyptian isn't going to say anything because, well, he's dead. There's really only one person left that would say something, and that would probably be the very person that he spared and that he saved, which is interesting. And that's probably sometimes even how it is in life, how sometimes it's the people that you actually try to help that are the ones that will do you in. Not the person that is out for you, but the person that you bring to work, the one that you give a ride to school. And you're like, you? Go ahead. I see you, Darlene.
It can also be that the guy was thankful and he was telling his family and friends, and then somebody who was prejudiced so to the point
Maybe.
that they hated him.
Maybe, could be that too.
They probably all hated him, but
Yeah, and he quickly sees that I'm not able to lead these people, even though he tries and attempts to help. And so I think Moses knows that this is something he's supposed to do, but he really doesn't know how to go about doing it. And how many times do we see that play out? Go ahead, Darlene.
I also had a thought a minute ago. When the guy says, "Who made you prince and ruler over us?" Well, Moses is hearing this, and you know how God works in mysterious ways. It seems kind of like God is reminding Moses, "I'm the reason you're here."
Yeah, and it could be that as well. And the irony is he's raised as a prince, and then this guy says this as well. Who made you the prince and judge over us? So it could be a number of things. It could be that. It could be also maybe they know and think this guy is gonna treat us the same way. It's like, who made you, ruler? Nick.
It also can be said that he does become prince and judge over Israel.
Yeah.
And God installs him, but not yet.
Right. So a little foreshadowing there as well, which is good. But yeah, he knows that he doesn't know how to go about being what God wants him to be at this time. And I think about our own lives and how many times we see this play out in the Bible where people don't want to wait on what God has planned. We can think of Abraham and Sarah, with Isaac, and they try to make it happen on their own because they don't want to wait. And Ishmael comes as a result of that. We can think of Saul, King Saul in the Old Testament, that's supposed to wait for Samuel before he makes a sacrifice before going to war. And he doesn't wait, and he does it himself. We can think of Peter telling Jesus, when Jesus says, "I'm going to go to the cross and die," and he pulls him aside and goes, "No, not you. This is not going to happen to you," after just saying, "Thou art the Son of the living God." And we can think of our own lives where we don't want to wait for things and don't want to wait for God. And I don't know what it is. Sometimes we feel like whatever is in our lap, we have to deal with it at that moment, and it can't wait. It can't wait for a prayer or a devotion or a "God, is this right?" Or "I'll get back to you on this after praying." We feel like we have to deal with things in this moment and now. Todd.
Moses is getting a taste of what's going to happen anyway
Mm-hmm.
when he tries to lead the people.
Yeah.
That's exactly how they're going to treat him.
Yeah.
And it doesn't mean what he did, not meaning what he did was correct or right, proper before God, but God's giving him a taste of what he's going to get.
Yeah. And this is really what happens when we and Moses in this regard, we try to make God's plan happen in our way. I know that's your plan, and this is how I'm going to maneuver that to happen. Nancy?
For me, the lesson is that while I'm waiting, and take a very, very long time, and I may not get the answer before he calls me home. He has other tasks. He wants to use me in a way that takes my mind off the control of the situation. And there could be a multitude of blessings in following him and not standing still waiting. And it is in the waiting
It is.
that we have a choice.
Yeah, and the waiting isn't just being idle. That's an actual strenuous, stressful,
Yeah.
mental task of, can you wait on this, or are you going to do this yourself and take this into your own hands? And that's something that we all, and I know I struggle with, especially when things happen and I feel the need to step in and do something, even if it could be the wrong thing. And that's just what happens here, and that's what happens in our lives many times. And the problem really for Moses is, at this stage where he is now, he doesn't really know the true God. He knows of God from his mother, but he doesn't know God truly yet to be able to even step into these things. And I think even as a parent, it's one of the things, and probably stresses and burdens, that we probably all face with our young people or kids, especially when they go off to college or start their own lives individually, is that we can put you in the environment to know God, but we can't know God for you. You've got to know God for yourself. And it really isn't something that just happens in knowing him for yourself. It's not going to happen just in the hustle and bustle of life. It is something that you're going to have to be still to know, be still to wait, be proactive, and take the time to know God in a situation. It's not just something that happens because we just are off and doing our own thing and do what we need to do and kind of take things as they come without the waiting and truly knowing God. Alan?
Well, I'm not perfect at this, obviously, but I think that's a true meaning or testament of faith. Maybe we walk around and say, yes, we have faith, we believe in God, but it's those hard times when do we really trust that he is working for our good, he is doing something for us. And I think in my classes, I kind of touch on that, is that, feelings come into play. I feel I need to do something. I feel that this is going to, I feel this is the better, reaction. I feel that this is the better thing to do. I feel it's the better way. And our feelings take over. And you're right, it is hard to just let those be still and know that God is doing something.
Yeah, that's good. And feeling isn't faith. You can feel like you have faith, and it turns out you may not have faith. You might feel like you don't have that great of faith, and all of a sudden a situation happens and you're able to step into that and do what you're supposed to do, and you're like, I didn't know that I had faith. So you can't even depend on your feelings when it comes to faith. It's not a feeling. Go ahead, Vern.
Well, faith will cause us to persevere. That should be in our prayer all the time, that we finish. And you pray for your brethren that they finish.
Yeah.
too.
Yeah, that's good. That's good. And that's the thing we need to do, is just continue to look at God through his word and continue to know. And really, to know God is to know yourself. Go ahead.
That verse you just had up there, to be still, that reminds me of a relationship with God, trying to get closer to him, trying to seek and say what he wants you to do in any situation. It's that relationship.
Yeah, and I don't have it up there, but that is from Jeremiah 30, chapter 31 through 33. Be still and know that I'm God. And just what you said, as far as you're going in and coming out, and you have to know who he is and what his will is. And it is the first step, right, to knowing who you really are. You can't really know who you are and what you're supposed to do here until you know God. Moses tried to do it on his own, but it's only after he came to know God that he really was called to do what he was supposed to do. In fact, that's the only way any of us can know who we really are. Exodus 2:16. Now a priest of Midian had 7 daughters and they came to draw water and filled the troughs to water their father's flock. Some shepherds came along and drove them away, but Moses got up and came to their rescue and watered the flock. Moses is running, but he can't really run from who he is. And you can't run from who you are. Because guess who's going to be wherever you go? You. You can't run from God, and you can't run from who you are. And just based on what we see from Moses in these past two scenarios, he's the type of person that just can't see a wrong being done and not do anything. You can just see that's who he is, without stepping in or trying to lead or trying to fix the situation. This is how he's wired, and that's how God made him. God puts innate qualities and characteristics in us that have to do with the calling that he's placed on us. There are things that he knows what he's made you for. 2 chapters before that, where he says, before you were in the womb and formed you, I knew you. He makes you for the task that he prepares you for. So even as we look at Moses, he was wired to lead, wired to step in, to want to help, to want to lead people. And you see it in this. He just didn't know how to do it, but those are in him. So I would ask you, what are the things that make you angry? Or the things that happen where you just can't sit idly by without doing something? What are those things? It just may be that God has called you to something that have to do with those things. All of us, it may be something different. But God puts those in you for what he has for you. Verse 21. Moses agreed to stay with the man, and we know here that at this point, Moses basically settles in with a Midian priest named Ruel and marries one of his daughters. And so Moses really, at this point in his life, is going through his own personal wilderness, so to speak. And it is for 40 years, just like the children of Israel, ironically. He's in his own personal wilderness after a life of running. He settles in Midian, marries the daughter of this Midianite priest, and spends the next 40 years of his life being a shepherd. So he's gone from a prince, basically, to thinking he was supposed to be some great rescuer, to being a murderer, and now a shepherd for 40 years. Now, I'm sure this was not the life that Moses was envisioning for himself at this time, being just a shepherd. Go ahead, Vern.
Now he's in his time of waiting.
Mm-hmm.
That's how hard it can be.
Yeah, he is definitely in that time. He is herding sheep, and he's thinking, this is not what I was called to, and this isn't what I thought for myself. And I know sometimes we can think that with our own lives. You know what? I didn't see this for me, or I didn't plan for this to happen, and this circumstance happens, and now I'm living this when I had planned this. Todd.
He probably felt like he had destroyed his calling
Yeah.
with the Lord, because he felt he had a calling, sensed it, but he felt he destroyed it with this because he separated it from his people and he could never go back.
Yeah, it's like that ship has sailed. Yep, that's exactly what he thinks. Rhonda?
I mean, we have the ability to, we see the outcome, right? But, even in that, even in the waiting, there was preparation.
Mm-hmm.
Because, even in Moses being a shepherd, he had to hone and develop skills needed to shepherd people.
Mm-hmm.
And I think about that, like, in our own lives, like, I think about, my life specifically, where there were things that happened earlier on that I was like, why in the world am I here? Why am I doing this? What is this about? And asking God and not understanding. And now, like many, many, many years later, it's like, I see. I see why. I see why that happened, because I can those skills here.
Yeah, that's good. That's good. And you're right into my next point. This is just not only his waiting place. This is actually his training ground. This wilderness, and that can be it for us many times. God uses these 40 years as training for him. Moses thinks he's just herding sheep. That's all he thinks. But he's actually learning compassion. He's learning patience. He's learning how to deal with stubbornness. Sheep are stubborn, wanting their own way. Moses is leading sheep for 40 years. To lead sheep and to be a shepherd, you've got to have patience with sheep. A sheep will walk right off a cliff to its own demise and not think twice about it. Did you actually know that there are some sheep and a lot of sheep that won't even go where the grass is 5 feet from them to pasture, where it says, he makes me lie down in green pastures. A sheep will literally starve to death with grass 5 feet away. Won't even go to the grass. You've got to make them do this. You've got to make them do that. And basically, a shepherd has to do everything for the sheep, everything. So God has Moses learning really how to tend with sheep because he's got some other sheep that need tending to in Egypt that he'll be dealing with later. And so this is training ground for him. Go ahead, Vern.
It also says he leads me by the still waters. From what I understand, sheep will not drink out of moving water.
Mm-hmm.
It scares them.
Yeah.
So they have to be by still water because they feel they'll be carried away.
Yeah, yeah. You've got to do everything for them. And so really, so when Moses was ready, not when Moses was ready, but rather when God was ready, he calls Moses back to give him a second chance at really what he was born to do the first time. And that's what God does. In Exodus 3:6, he says, then he said, I am the God of your father, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, the God of Jacob. At this, Moses hid his face because he was afraid to look at God. I'll skip down here. And the Lord said, I have indeed seen the misery of my people in Egypt. I have heard them crying out because of their slave drivers, and I am concerned about their suffering. And I'll jump down to verse 10. And so now I am sending you to Pharaoh to bring my people, the Israelites, out of Egypt. And so now Moses moves knowing about God, and he moves from just knowing about him to actually knowing him, and really knowing him in a way that most people would never know God on this side of eternity, in the ability to even talk to him like a man talks to a man. When he chastises Miriam for saying, doesn't God speak through us too? And God calls her and Aaron to the carpet and says, I speak to our prophets through dreams, but not with Moses. I speak to him face to face. So why would you think that you could say that about him? And then gives her leprosy. And of course, Moses pleads for her life, and she's spared. Go ahead, Rob.
So then the only information Moses ever had about God was from his mother.
Mm-hmm.
Because
Yes.
these Midianites were Baal was.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. And so I would imagine at this where it says he hid his face and was afraid to look, I'm sure that he was like, wow, this really is that God that my mother was talking about. Because I'm sure she would have said Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. And so when he identifies himself as this, Moses knows exactly who he's talking to. On top of, hearing it from a bush that's burning, that's not being ablaze. So it's just something to see at that point. And so in Exodus 33:10, again, as I was just saying, the Lord would speak to Moses face to face as one speaks to a friend. Then Moses would return to camp, but his young aide, Joshua, son of Nun, did not leave the tent. The Lord would speak to Moses face to face as one speaks to a friend. And so we know that about Moses. And we also know that he leads them out of Israel and through the Red Sea. But we also know the ins and outs of him being trained to be a shepherd, that they aggravated him to no end, and to God, where God would think to destroy them at times. And so we know this about Moses. And they aggravate him to a point to where it comes to bite him, really. Where God tells Moses to strike a rock at one point, and he does. And then he tells him again to speak to the rock. And out of frustration, he strikes the rock instead. And we know that the rock obviously represented Jesus. The first time, he was only supposed to strike that rock one time, where it says, even prophesied, and even in the New Testament too, saying the shepherd will be struck once and the sheep will scatter. And then also where he strikes the rock and water comes out, he was supposed to speak to it. Remember when Jesus was talking to the woman at the well and says, if you knew who I was, you would ask me for a drink and I would give you living water from inside of you that would spring wells of living water of life. But he speaks, instead he strikes the rock, and it cost him going to the promised land for that. Alan and then Todd. Go ahead.
What I find interesting about that is the second time he specifically told him, bring your staff. So he had that in his head to do that.
Right.
Told him, bring
Right.
your staff. So he had that to fall
Oh
back.
yeah, like I know what's going to happen here. Yeah.
And his own feelings when he wasn't supposed to. So,
Yeah.
I find it interesting that God specifically told him to bring your staff. Let's speak to it.
Yeah. Good stuff.
It's all based on his understanding, because the first time he killed someone. And, God, basically pushed him out of the camp. But here, he just strikes the rock. Now, he really knows God. So now he knows, even though it sounds like a small thing, it's actually a big thing.
It's a big thing, right?
And he knows it. You've got to know that he knows it on some level, that what he's done is incorrect.
Yeah. And that symbolism can no longer be used the way it was intended to be used, representing Jesus in the New Testament. Go ahead, Vern.
And you see Moses in scripture going up to the top of the Mount Pisgah and looking over the promised land.
Yeah, and that's a tough one. Yeah, God, it's almost like eat your heart out. I'll let you see it, but you can't go in. And he asked God multiple times, and to the point where God said, don't ask me about this again. I'm like, you can't get more of a no from God than that. And so, he doesn't go in with that. But even though he doesn't go in, look at what God says. He speaks to him as a friend. Look at what God does for his friend. And we'll end with that in this series. Mark chapter 9, verse 2. I'll read through 4. After 6 days, Jesus took Peter, James, and John with him and led them up a high mountain where they were all alone. There he was transfigured before them. His clothes became dazzling white, whiter than anyone could bleach them. And there appeared before him Elijah and Moses, who were talking with Jesus. In Hebrews 1:3, it says the Son, and remember where Moses said, I want to see your glory, and God said, you can't. But here, and it says the Son is the radiance of God's glory, the exact representation of his being, sustaining all things by his powerful word. After he provided purification for sins, he sat down at the right hand of the majesty in heaven. 1 Corinthians 13:12 says, for now we see as a reflection of mirror, then shall we see face to face. Now I know in part, then I shall know, even as I am fully known. So now Moses not only gets to see on this side of glory what he asked God to see, Moses in the New Testament gets another chance to speak to the rock that he struck in the Old Testament. And God gives him that opportunity. And I don't know how God does what God does, but God gives him another chance even after his death to make right what he didn't do in the Old Testament. And he gets to speak to the rock. For any of you that think it's not possible and your time has passed, you can just look at that and think, is there anything too hard for God? Nothing, nothing at all. Sometimes you might think that that ship has sailed for you, where that time has passed and I don't have it. And all of a sudden something rewinds, or something happens and all of a sudden it's there for you to do. Vern.
It says he'll make up for the wasted years.
Mm-hmm. Micah 3, yeah, exactly. Malachi. He will make up for it. And sometimes you don't think that you have it. But Jesus meets us where we are. And Jesus, it's interesting that Jesus, who represented the rock in the Old Testament, met Moses where he was. And I'm sure Moses thought about that the whole time, about the implications of what he had done, and God makes it right. And he's able to do that for us. And that's just us. And we may think we're in a wilderness situation, and God may actually be training us for what he has for us next. We might think, why am I here? Why am I going through this? And you may feel like the world is closing in on you and you're being crushed, but you're really being called. When you feel like you're being buried, you're actually being planted. So God gives us those second chances. And so really, I would just encourage you as we end this lesson for second chances and multiple chances. I wouldn't even say second chance, because if you're like me, you need third, fourth, fifth, sixth, 37th. You need that for God. So it really is, he really is the God of another chance for us in our lives. And so don't ever think that that window for you has closed to get things right with God. And so I will end with that, and then beginning of the new year, we will have Alan teaching us from there. Don, you want to close this?